Hello everyone, good afternoon. I'm Tracy Abel, Chief Operating Officer here at American College of Healthcare Sciences. And thank you for joining us today for our Beyond the Cap Conversations in Complementary Alternative Medicine Conference. Before we get started with our next session, just a couple of housekeeping items. First, joining us today behind the scenes is our technical genius, Andy Pearson. He'll be running the GoToMeeting today and available to assist all of you online should you need it during the session. For those of you joining us online, you'll notice that your line has been muted. We are recording today's session, and we will be sharing the slides and recording with everyone after the presentation next week. You'll also notice that you have a control panel at the right-hand side of your screen. If you have a question for the presenter during the presentation, go ahead and type your question into the questions box, and we will have time at the end for question and answers. If you have a more detailed question, please send an email to info@achs.edu, and we will facilitate you getting in touch with Dorene, our next presenter, and learning more about your question. Our next session is presented by ACHS founding president Dorene Petersen, who is standing here. Dorene founded the college in 1978, and this year ACHS celebrates our 40th anniversary. Dorene is a renowned herbalist and aromatherapist and is the chairperson for the Aromatherapy Registration Council. Dorene also leads our study abroad and workshop programs, including the upcoming aromatherapy boot camp in Kona, Hawaii. Hint, hint, there's still time to join us. It is November 4th through 9th.
And there is snorkeling.
And there is mandatory snorkeling. So it is now my pleasure to introduce Dorene for her presentation on synergy in aromatherapy.
Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Tracy, and thank you, Andy, and thank you to the previous speaker, Inga. You did a wonderful job talking about CO2s. So as you heard, I'm Dorene Petersen. It's a pleasure to be here today. Thank you to everyone who left the gorgeous sunshine outside and stepped inside for the day. And thank you to everyone who's attending virtually in our virtual classroom. So what I'm going to talk about today is something that I've found throughout my clinical work in the last 40 odd years I've been working. I trained as a naturopathic doctor in New Zealand, not equivalent to naturopathic doctor here in the US, more on the European model. So the focus is more wellness and, staying well rather than using botanicals and other modalities as a similar kind of shotgun approach as pharmaceuticals. So what we're going to cover today, 8 steps to creating a therapeutic blend. We're going to be touching on synergy. Now, I know other speakers prior spoke about that, and I was really pleased to hear that. We're going to be looking at some notable biological activity of lavandula angustifolia, mentha piperita, and eucalyptus globulus, just 3 really common essential oils. I'm also going to be looking at some specific therapeutic blends. So before you start to blend with essential oils, not to say that you have to create a blend, you can use a single essential oil, but the whole concept of synergy is to create something more dynamic than a single use essential oil. So the first thing you have to do is determine what body systems are out of balance. What is really going on with each unique individual. So what we teach here at ACHS is definitely an individualized, holistic approach to wellness and complementary alternative medicine. There's no one magic remedy good for all. And so each person is going to need a unique approach. You determine what therapeutic actions are needed. So what are you really looking for as an end goal? You develop a list of essential oils, so very similar to a homeopathic protocol. When you use homeopathy, again, it's a very individualized process. It takes, at least an hour to really, maybe longer, to really evaluate the needs of that specific individual, and then you have a long list of homeopathic remedies, just the same with essential oils. This is the way I like to create my essential oil protocols. I remove any oils from the list that may be contraindicated. So this was already talked about this morning by Professor Stewart and also Sarah, who gave a wonderful presentation, an ACHS graduate. Both of those previous speakers spoke about contraindication, and it's really important when you use any modality to really look at what is going on in that client's life. Is that client on a specific range of pharmaceuticals? Is there a chronic condition where the pharmaceuticals are going to be taken over a long period of time? Is there an acute condition? That's again something that Professor Stewart touched on. So those are all things you have to think about. Now, essential oils are just like any other modality, botanical. They do come with contraindications to various things, and we'll touch on that a little bit. I like to select the fewest number of oils possible. I'm a great believer in the smallest dose and the smallest number of oils. I really valued what Professor Stewart said about the Chinese doctor way back in prior to BC, 2500 BC, that, you know, the smallest dose possible is really ideal. Create a small test sample of the blend, because aromatherapy is very intriguing in that it's one of the few modalities, one of the few really things that you can use that affect both simultaneously the mind and the body at the same time. Now think about it, what else does that? And quickly too. I mean, meditation, well, that takes kind of, more than just, all right, I'm going to meditate now, and you've got it, right? So essential oils are incredible for that reason. When you inhale an essential oil, I'm sure you all know about the actual physiological process. There's a whole cascade of events go on. The hypothalamus, which is considered the master or mistress gland, is going to create a cascade of events down through your body physiologically. But also, the essential oil is going to manifest in the limbic part of your brain, the part of your brain that retains memory, the part of your brain where memories can be locked away until you smell a specific aroma. So that's why aromatherapy and essential oil therapy is very individualized. It's very unique to each person. Now, Julie, sitting here, might have had a bad experience as a kid and not like lavender oil. So lavender for her is never going to be, and I'm talking lavandula angustifolia, it's never going to be sedating. It's never going to be relaxing, because somehow, some way, she had a bad experience, and so now whenever she smells it, a cascade of cortisol goes through her body. It's never going to work. So your previous experience with an oil, and this is proven, this work was originally done by a scientist called Jelinek. You can check this out. The first memory you have of an oil will dominate your physiological reaction pretty much for the remainder of your life. Interesting, huh? That's what makes aromatherapy an art as well as a science, because you really need to relate to people on a very individualized level. Create a small test sample of the blend. So that's why you do it, because you know what? If I give Julie a blend that's primarily lavender and she needs anti-anxiety, sedative reaction, and for her that has the opposite reaction, well, guess what? She's going to say, well, aromatherapy doesn't work, right? And you hear, bless you, you hear a lot of people saying that. I mean, not a lot, but every now and again I hear people say, oh yeah, I tried lavender. Well, as Scott mentioned, there's like 38 different kinds of lavender, so it could have been the wrong kind of lavender. And of course, no lavender is the wrong kind, but you don't want to choose the one that's high in camphor if you're looking for sedative effect. So always a small test sample of the blend, because if you don't like it, if your client doesn't like it, it's not going to work. Prepare enough of the blend for your client to use and explain to the client what to expect. I should also have added there, prepare your blend with intent. I'm a great believer in when you prepare medicine for yourself or somebody else, and I use the term medicine loosely, I consider food medicine as well, so I'm talking about cooking as well. I'm a firm believer in doing it with the intent of wellness. And if you infuse what you do and what you're producing with the intent of wellness, I believe the energetic frequencies of that material will contain that. And homeopathy is very much along those lines. There's a philosophical basis to preparation, and also flower essences. So let's look at what we do know. Let's go back to basics. We know that when we smell an essential oil, it's entering our body through inhalation. That's obvious, right? You can also apply it topically when you would also be inhaling it, or we teach here at ACHS safe oral administration. The chemical constituents that are found in essential oils, just like a botanical, they're a complex mixture. It's plant and lot specific. So you can't just say that, you know, all lavender is going to have 45% linyl acetate. It does not. It depends on the altitude it grows. It depends on the year, on the environment, on how it was harvested, what the soil was like, how it was handled during harvesting, how it was distilled, etc., etc. So complex chemical constituents. But pharmaceuticals may also undergo the same, you know, may take the same pathways or act in the same way. So they can both enter the body, take the same biotransformation pathways. They can use the same substrates for the same enzymes, and they can land on the same receptors. Now, in my work as a naturopath and working in a clinic for a number of years, I really truly believe wellness is associated with enzyme function. I mean, wellness is associated with many things, but enzyme function is a huge thing. You really have to have functional enzymes in the body. They're activators. Enzymes are activators. So when you take essential oils, and they're all going to end up in your body no matter which way you take it. In fact, inhalation is the fastest route into the bloodstream. And that's not just essential oils. You smell something, it's going to be entering your bloodstream. Because to smell anything, it has to have volatile molecules. And the volatile molecules are entering your bloodstream through the very process I described initially. So just think about, you know, what is happening when your body takes in an essential oil. So let's talk about interactions, contraindications, and synergy. Now, as a professional aromatherapist or herbalist, it's extremely important to be very conscientious and educated about contraindications and interactions and adverse reactions. But not all interactions are adverse reactions. Essential oils can work in harmony or synergistically, not only with each other or singly, but with pharmaceuticals. They can enhance the benefits of pharmaceuticals, but in some cases they create antagonistic or negative interactions. So when we talk about antagonism, synergy, zero and additive interactions, this kind of, you know, it is to somewhat dose dependent, but antagonism is where there's definitely a negative interaction. Synergism, when there's a positive interaction or an increased effect. There may also be zero interaction. So, you know, really it's nothing to worry about. And I don't know suddenly why the M has dropped down, but that is antagonism, not antagonism. Now, this I thought was interesting. The insecticidal activity of this particular pesticide, which when I looked it up was pretty scary. In my work sourcing the materials for all of the lab kits here at ACHS, I focus on certified organic, not just because I'm looking for low pesticides. Certified organic is more than just no pesticides. It's about soil diversity, it's about the health of the workers, et cetera, et cetera. But it's really made me focus a lot on the contamination globally that we currently experience from pesticide use. Because even when we buy certified organic, occasionally a certified organic product will still contain pesticides. We test everything that comes in here for both pesticides, for all pesticides, and we also run it through an independent lab for the GCMS, so it's lot specific. And it's very concerning when particular oils or herbs come in and they have pesticides. We always start with a sample, so of course we wouldn't buy it. The European Union now has minimum acceptable levels of pesticides, and certified organic should not have any, but they now have a list for botanicals, certified organic botanicals, and that has all minimum residue levels, MRLs, that are permitted in medicinal herbs in the European Union. And it looks like from a lot of the my colleagues who are involved in the European Union affairs and IFRA and other things in Europe, that essential oils won't be far behind. There'll be acceptable levels, because basically the world's saturated. So this particularly nasty pesticide here was used for aphids on peaches, because aphid on peaches is a huge global problem. And they found that by mixing lavender and thyme with the pesticide, they were looking for bio-alternatives to the pesticide. The action of the pesticide was actually reduced. Now, I mean, you might think that's a good thing, but it was an interesting result that they did not expect. And then they used lavender and thyme without the pesticide, and guess what? It worked better than the pesticide. So I thought that was a very interesting. Julie, did you have a question?
Well, I was going to ask if they had tried just essential oils or any other essential oils to use instead of pesticides.
Yeah, so I mean, they are looking at a lot of they're calling them biocides, a lot of botanical solutions to the pesticide contamination. And the same with larvicides, materials that can kill insects. We have an issue now with a lot of mosquito strains becoming resistant to chemical larvicides. Now, particularly the dengue fever mosquito is resistant to the larvicides that they had been using, an organophosphate larvicide. So they were looking at a variety of essential oils to work with that, and they found that clove, Syzygium aromaticum, and Citrus sinensis, sweet orange, and here you can see I'm going to see if this pointer works for me. I thought this was interesting. No, it doesn't work. So here you actually have the essential oil cells in the sweet orange, and clove bud oil is the preferable source of oil for essential oil work, primarily because of the higher eugenol content in clove bud than clove leaf. But clove is actually manufactured from pretty much the whole plant: the leaf, the twig, the little seed, the clove bud. So resistance was actually found. The mosquito strain still had resistance to the combo of the pesticide and the clove and citrus blend, but again, when it was used without the larvicide, it worked much better. So, I mean, it actually was very successful. So again, botanicals, essential oils being antagonistic to a synthetic product. So let's take a look at how long has this word synergy been around? This was from an 1853 medical dictionary. And synergy basically means with work. It's from two Greek words, and just, you know, different ways of looking at the same concept. In fact, Aristotle talked about synergy, and he was the first to say the whole is more than the sum of its parts. And that's really what we're talking about. You can think about it like a bicycle. I mean, if you were going to take the wheels and the brakes off a bicycle, you wouldn't get too far, right? So, I mean, you really need all of that. And I'm talking about this because some scientists want to find out what constituents in an essential oil make something work. Why does it do that? Oh, if it's only the lineal acetate, let's just make the lineal acetate in a lab or synthesize it. We can even call it nature identical. Well, don't believe it. Plant sourced essential oil synergy. So the synergy exists within a whole oil. So a plant needs all of the constituents to really have the therapeutic outcome you want it to have. And blends of essential oils can have an even greater outcome because the blends are harmonious with each other. So here I've shown you some constituents, for example, within clove: eugenol, eugenol acetate, humulene, and caryophyllene. Now, what's interesting in clove is they actually have done research with just the eugenol, or just the eugenol and the eugenol acetate, the two main constituents. These are the dominant constituents of clove bud oil. And you know what? It doesn't have the same success rate. So clove is one very distinct essential oil that works better as a whole oil. So complete oil synergy, again, as far back as 74, they were able to show that Citriodora, Eucalyptus citriodora, was more effective as an antimicrobial as a whole oil, rather than taking just the two major constituents, citronellol, and citronellol. So essential oil synergy also works with antibiotics. Now, most of you probably know the World Health Organization recently shared an alert that we face a global problem of antibiotic bacterial resistance. And TB, tuberculosis, is now killing more people in the world than HIV. And that is because TB has become resistant to every antibiotic on the planet. And there's way more resistant bacteria every day. Bacteria are really smart. They change really quickly. They adapt really quickly. I mean, it's phenomenal. And when you think about it, we're all walking bacteria houses. All of us, no matter how much you shower, bathe, any of it, inside and out, we're covered in bacteria. And of course, some of those bacteria are great, right? But when it gets out of balance, that's the problem. So it's pretty scary when you think that bacteria are resistant to antibiotics. I was talking about this with a friend of mine. We were talking about urinary tract infections. Imagine in the old days if you got a UTI. I mean, people must have died of that, right? Because it just can come on exceptionally quickly, and before you know it, no amount of cranberry is doing what it has to do. And that is one of the issues with natural medicine. You really have to take remedies well before you get too sick. So the minute you start to feel off, you have to really begin treating yourself. And if you wait until the bacteria has, really, and I'm talking a bacterial or viral, if the bacteria gets a hold, it's very hard to overcome it with natural remedies. So it's very important to be aware of your body and understand, is it time, to take something? And sometimes illness manifests in the mind and an emotional upset as well. So even if you've had a particularly upsetting emotional time, it's very important to bring yourself back into harmony, both physically and emotionally. And I don't know if any of you have studied flower essences, but Dr. Bach was a great believer in that all illness begins in the mind and the emotional body. So very important to think about that. So yes, essential oils and antibiotics. Essential oils can actually improve the action of antibiotics. Good to think about when you think what we're facing. This was an interesting study done in Iran where they looked at ciprofloxacin and Pelargonium graveolens, which is geranium. And this is indeed about with bacteria that cause UTIs. So they found that those two working together improved the action of the ciprofloxacin, which is a good thing if you think these bacteria are becoming, particularly Staph aureus and the Klebsiella, that is also becoming resistant. Sweet orange oil, again, just going back to complete essential oil synergy. Citrus sinensis, strong antifungal. Limonene, not so much. So here's a good example where we need the presence of constituents, even the low proportion constituents, to create that overall synergy within the essential oil. So synergy with blends. For clinical work, this is where we're really getting to the good stuff and where we'll start to pass out some smells. Combining essential oils with similar constituents can really create a more powerful action. So we know that any oil with thymol or any oil with carvacrol is most likely going to be an antimicrobial. Now, you have to be a little specific, and Inga touched on this, whether it's a gram-positive bacteria or a gram-negative bacteria. Anybody know the difference? What makes it, why should we care whether it's gram-positive or gram-negative? Okay, so with gram-positive, the cell wall is much easier to penetrate than with a gram-negative bacteria. Gram-negative bacteria, they've got like a biofilm, and then they've got an inner cell wall that's very difficult for an essential oil or other things, pharmaceuticals, to penetrate. So they're very resistant to and very difficult to overcome. Oh gosh, this layout really went off, didn't it, on changing it to another computer. That's interesting. There's always an exception to the rule, right? Not that any of this is rules, but we're talking about how the majority of essential oils work best as a complete oil. Well, tea tree, Australian, Melaleuca alternifolia, is one exception. I mean, how weird is that? That terpenine 4-ol, which is the primary constituent of Melaleuca, was shown to have a greater effect on its own as an antibacterial, antimicrobial. Now, you know, I always take research. I love reading research, and you know, everything we teach here is research based. And of course, there's a ton of research out there now on essential oils. When I first started, I mean, it was like looking for a needle in a haystack, right? Well, of course, there was no internet either, so it was long hours in the library. But you know, you always have to take research with a critical eye as well. Very important to be critically, really critically assess what you're reading. And this is just one example. It's only a couple of pieces of research, and it's always possible that the essential oil was oxidized. Now, when an essential oil is oxidized, i.e. old, it's beyond its shelf life, the free radicals have definitely taken over. As Inga was talking about, as we age, we have less ability to overcome free radicals. I don't know why they're called free radicals. That sounds really kind of cool to be a free radical, don't you think? It's like, what is that about? All right, so anyway, if it's oxidized, it can become a very negative experience to use an oxidized tea tree oil, particularly on your skin. It can actually cause quite a lot of skin damage. So very important not to use oxidized oils ever. And I have an interesting oxidized oil to show you actually. I think it's the little one, it's the chamomile, Roman chamomile. Oh, it's sandalwood. Did they bring the chamomile in? No?
Oh, yes, here.
Oh, good. Oh, good. Is that German chamomile?
No.
Okay, no, we have a little German chamomile. I want to show everyone. Just because you talked about German chamomile as well and the blueness of German chamomile, this is a whole nother lecture, of course. How do you tell, the quality of an essential oil? It's always fun, but I really want to show you this because it's visually powerful. Lavender. So let's start on blends. So one study found that lavender is synergistic and enhanced by adding various other oils to it. So this particular study found that adding citrus sinensis and cinnamon to lavender in a 1:1 ratio, so lavender, sweet orange, and cinnamon, if we put all of those on 3 sticks and pass around the blend, you will experience what that smells like, but also the antimicrobial action of that was way more than any of these oils on their own. And sinensis is not even antimicrobial on its own. Lavender is, surprisingly enough. You don't think of it as antimicrobial, but it is. And of course, cinnamon is. Cinnamon really kicks. It's powerful. Very powerful against E. coli. So while Inga's getting that ready, we'll move on to the next. Lavender chamomile. Well, that's good because we're looking at the chamomile synergistic blend. Now, this was an interesting trial done with chronic leg ulcers. And it was a very tiny trial, but I thought it was worth talking about because it's, leg ulcers, once you get a leg ulcer, it's very hard to improve them quickly, particularly in elderly patients. And it's quite, excuse me, I'm just going to grab the chamomile sample. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm going to pass this round, but for all our virtual people, I want you to look at the color of that. Can you see that? I'm not sure if you can. But from there, what color would you say it was? Brown, black, right. So it's really, this actually still smells pretty good. But by the time it's gone this color, it's old. It's oxidized. So chamomile is it's a great oil in that it's easy to tell if it's oxidized because it changes color. Some other oils you can't tell quite the same way. They smell very different, but you have to smell a good one to know a bad one, right? To know an oxidized one. So that's another class altogether. I'm going to pass this around. Thank you so much, Andy, for giving that. I know at first it was, oh, I can't show you that. It's terrible. That was in my sample room, by the way. it's not an oil we're selling. So anyway, did the blend go around?
Yes.
Wonderful. So what do you think of that blend?
Sounds good.
Isn't that good? Yeah, so getting back to leg ulcers very difficult to work with. Now in this trial, there weren't many people, 5. That's, not a lot of people, but 5 received a 6% mixture of the 2 essential oils in grapeseed carrier oil. 3 received conventional wound care, while 4 of the 5 patients in the control group had complete healing of the wounds, with the 5th making progress towards a recovery. So I thought that was pretty great. So we're not going to bother putting together the lavender and German chamomile unless you really want to. It still smells pretty good actually, which is incredible. So let's just take a look at some other things that research has shown about lavender angustifolia. Reduces symptoms of colic in infants. In all of the research I've listed, I've either numbered, and you'll find it on the back page, and because there's a lot on this slide, I've put all of these under the number 13, just to tell you how the referencing is working. Reduces anxiety and depression in high-risk postpartum women, provides support for post-traumatic stress disorder, and can alleviate agitated behaviour in patients with dementia. However, having said that, again, remember, essential oil therapy is a highly individualised modality. So if somebody has had a bad experience with lavender in the past, I would not recommend using it. It's also an antimicrobial, lavender, which we touched on briefly. So here we could blend, well, I think we did that already, didn't we?
That's
cinnamon, citrus. Yeah. So this is in a 1:1 ratio, and it was found to work very well. The greater antibacterial and antifungal activity, this was an in vitro piece of research with the gram-positive bacteria, staph, and epidermis, and gram-negative, again, remember I told you that's quite difficult, the E. coli and the candida. So this blend is angustifolia, clary sage, salvia scleria, and lang lang, Cananga odorata var genuina, and it was a 3:4:3 ratio. Very successful. Pre-hypertension. So this trial showed that blood pressure and salivary cortisol concentration in patients with hypertension and pre-hypertension had a very immediate reduction with inhalation of lavender. But again, remember what I said, very, for something like this, it's very client specific. Let's move on to peppermint. Peppermint is, again, just a very common essential oil, but has a lot of potential. Anti-carcinogenic, anti-emetic, and it reduces mental fatigue and burnout. So tonight, peppermint tea. And do you know what else I just read recently? There was a great piece of research I read because I'm very interested in memory and also brain health generally, that drinking 2 cups of peppermint tea a day, this particular study found improved memory retention in I know, Kimberly, I'm doing the same thing. So guess what I'm drinking lately? Peppermint tea. So peppermint is a wonderful essential oil for fungal infection. It extends the shelf life of food. Very important, considering we don't want synthetic preservatives in our food. And it can reduce the intensity and number of chemotherapy-induced nausea events. Very, very important for people undergoing chemotherapy. Eucalyptus, again, a very common essential oil and one that is just very easy to come across. There are a number of different varieties of eucalyptus. They all have a different chemical profile. Again, it has to be lot specific to really understand if the oil you are working with has what you need. But analgesic, antibacterial, antiseptic, pediculicide, and anti-dandruff, all really important. Anthelmintic, with a potential to support parasitic infection, which is basically the issue for this poor person's foot on the slide, because many parasites can actually enter your body through your feet, which is why, particularly when we go, I know, it's terrible, isn't it, Molly? When we go on our study abroad trips, you know, I'm sure the students think I'm just being, you know, like an old fuddy-duddy, but I'm saying, don't walk on the grass with bare feet. You know, I mean, I love walking in bare feet, and I love earthing, you know, and I love the sense of freedom with not wearing shoes. I grew up as a kid in New Zealand. Shoes were only for when you went out and went to school. And, you know, basically you ran through the woods free and easy without shoes. But truly in Asian countries and also in Central and South America, there are a number of parasites that enter your body through your feet. So even on the beaches, you don't want to be walking. Penetration enhancer and absorption enhancer. This is interesting. You think if you have, for example, a massage, your massage therapist uses some eucalyptus oil because maybe you've got a bit of a frog in your throat and you're feeling congested. If you are using a nicotine patch, or if you're using an estrogen patch and you apply that after you massage, well, guess what? You're probably going to enhance the absorption of that synthetic material faster than you might usually. So just be aware of that. It's also not a good essential oil to use if you're going to be going into surgery. Anyone think why?
Because you're going under anesthesia.
Right, you're going under anesthesia. And the other thing it does, it doesn't just enhance penetration, it speeds up the route of synthetic, elimination of synthetic chemicals within your body. So sometimes you want things to stay in there a little bit longer, right? You don't want to wake up under the knife. Mm-hmm. So there's reasons why, you know, you really need to know what's going on in somebody's life. You know, if you're a massage therapist, if you are working with oils clinically, it's really important to have a good conversation with your client. So here's some blends I want to quickly go over. That's a lot to put together, Inga. You don't have to do all that. I mean, it's bay, cloves, cinnamon, lavender, peppermint, pine, rose, tea tree, and thyme. I think we've talked enough about the synergy of the oils, and also a lot of these oils have very similar chemistry profiles. So they just really are great for, you know, really cleansing the air. So a lot of times you're in an atmosphere where, you know, people are coughing and sneezing and they don't do the, you know, in the elbow thing, and so they sneeze and then want to shake your hand, and, you know, you're going up the elevator in the busy airport and you're grabbing the side of the elevator, or you're leaving a public toilet and you've got to like pull the hand towel thing down and you touch what someone else has just touched, and then you see someone come out of the loo and they haven't washed their hands and they leave and they open the door. So, I mean, you know, the whole world is just like bacteria ridden. So it's great to I take this blend traveling. I have it diffusing in my house occasionally with, you know, some windows open. I have it diffusing in my office, and it's just a really great way to cleanse. And you can see here all of the issues that it can help to keep your immunity strong. Yes, Kimberly?
If you're going to put it in like an aerosol or a pump action atomizer, since oil doesn't mix with water, would it be better to mix it in a carrier oil for a spray versus putting water and alcohol? And I'm just wondering, I don't know.
That's a very good question. So the question for our online people is to mix this. Could you mix it with a base oil rather than alcohol to get it to really mix? Because as we know, oil and water do not mix. Very good question, Kimberly. I prefer to, first of all, I want to make sure that if I'm going to mix it and keep it or mix it, sometimes I just mix it and put it straight in the diffuser, but if I'm putting it in a bottle, I first of all want to make sure that the bottle is really clean. So just like Professor Stewart talked about, you really have to sterilize your bottle. I do mix my essential oils with alcohol first. So you don't put the water in first and then the alcohol, then the essential oils. Put the alcohol in first. I just use a certified organic vodka. And Julie's already at 5 o'clock here. Yes, so you then mix it really well with the vodka. And no, you're not making a cocktail, but it looks like you are, right? And you then add your distilled water. And make sure the water is distilled and fresh. You don't want to use a distilled water that is, already been opened and you've swigged out of the bottle. Because it is easy for contaminants to grow, even in an essential oil product like this. Anti-inflammatory inhalation, if you are, we're moving into winter, so it's good to think about, keeping your immunity and everything, really strong. You just simple eucalyptus peppermint, just put it together. You can do some vaporizing like this, or you can put it in a diffuser, you can put it in the bath. Remember, when you put anything in the bath, you want to make sure it has some dispersant with it. A whole fat milk is quite good to disperse essential oils, because you need fat. And fat and oil mix well. So it's not really going to mix that well with your water. And you don't want to get in the bath and have like a pool of oil on the top. You know what the first thing is that hits when you step in the bath? Places you don't want oil to go. PMS blend, supporting female reproductive organs and regulating female health, very important. This is one of my favorites, geranium, chamomile, and clary sage. Yes, Julie?
Just a quick question, for instance, on clary sage. If you've got someone who has an estrogen-dependent cancer or has the gene for an estrogen-dependent cancer, may not have the cancer, you eliminate the clary sage, or do you just eliminate this whole blend from your toolbox?
Julie, good question. The question for our online viewers is if you have someone with estrogen-dependent cancer, or even the gene for estrogen-dependent cancer, would I eliminate clary sage? Now, I'm assuming, Julie, you're thinking of the estragol or the thione in sage.
Yeah.
So clary sage has a little different profile. I think the estragol, and I mean, I really would want to look this up because I'm not 100% sure I'm correct, but I do think that it's very low, if not absent, from clary sage.
I was under the impression that clary sage could be used as bioidentical to estrogen. Did I have that wrong?
You know what? I have not heard that. I don't know. I don't know if you have it wrong. It's something I'd like to look at the research. There is a problem with Salvia officinalis. It's very high in thione. There's also a problem with bitterfenol. It's very high in estragol. Now, bitterfenol can have as high as like 80% estragol, whereas sweet phenol, it's usually under 5%. But even sweet phenol, it's not recommended for any estrogen-dependent issues. So any estragol is not recommended. So no, if something has estragol in it, short answer, check it out. That's a contraindication. Check it out. If it has it, don't use it. Good question. Oh, that smelled good, whatever that was, Judith. Was that the geranium, chamomile, clary sage? Oh, that was really good. Dysmenorrhea, clary sage, rose, and lavender. So just a little bit different. And again, wonderful for decreasing menstrual cramps. Bloating, geranium, lavender, lemon, sandalwood. That might be too difficult.
Well,
I'm going fast because I've only got a few minutes left, and we can make these up later too, so you can smell them. Skin protection. I thought I only had an hour. Okay, I'm going to calm down. Okay, so do you want that again? Geranium, lavender, lemon, and sandalwood. Clary, rose, and lavender.
Okay, and I'll just get the next one ready and put it together.
And geranium, lavender, lemon, sandalwood. Inga, would you like Julie's printout? Thank you so much. I was going to suggest it, but I thought that might be rude. Oh, are these all the printouts?
No, this is just for the next class.
Oh, gotcha. Skin protection blend, and I just want to remind everyone will get copies of all the PowerPoints. So you don't have to be, people online as well, don't have to be writing down notes. Clove, sandalwood, and lang lang in a camellia base for skin protection. So, bruising, chafing, dryness. Camellia oil in itself is a fantastic skin oil. It's prepared from Camellia sinensis, the tea plant, and we have samples in the store. You can try it. It just sinks into your skin like no other oil. Maybe like rosehip seed oil. That has incredible absorption abilities as well, and so does camellia. It's really a beautiful oil. It's the one oil that I can use on my face and I don't get sort of a reaction to having too much oil, too clogged. It's really a lovely oil. So having gone over all of this, I do have to let you know that, of course, like anything, you don't want to prolong the use of essential oils or herbal medicine or anything else for that matter. If you have continual or acute pain, it's very important you get that checked out. Pain is telling you there's a problem. If there's any sudden change, drastic in your condition, very important to get it checked out. If you are taking an essential oil and initially, or a herbal medicine, and initially you get results and then suddenly you don't and the symptoms return, very important to check that out. And you don't get encouraging results at all, you still have the symptom picture going on and you don't feel great, very important to get that checked out. Really, you want to discontinue after 48 hours. If something hasn't really hit home after 48 hours in an acute situation, probably is not going to happen. Now, chronic is different. Scott talked a little bit about this morning. Chronic and acute situations you want to handle differently, and everyone knows the difference. Anyone not know the difference? Do I need to explain it? Okay, everyone knows the difference? Okay, good. So remember, essential oils are part of a wider, holistic approach to healthcare. You're going to discontinue if you have any of those issues. I already said continual or acute pain, but also any issues with heart, circulation, breathing are all really important. And here are the references. And you'll see I put the numbers that are on the slides on the actual reference itself. And where there was more than one reference on a slide, I just used the same numbering and put the primary authors. There's my email address, and I was talking to Scott this morning, and some of you might have heard him say this. He said, I think it is introduction, but some of you might not have been here. And he said, you know, I really want to leave behind a wake of, you know, a group of really well-trained herbalists in my wake. And one of my biggest dreams when I was a young naturopath was, even though I loved being a naturopath and I loved meeting people one-on-one, and I really, really wanted to help them achieve wellness, I learned pretty quick that when you're on a one-on-one situation, you're not really reaching, you know, sometimes the people who really need to learn about wellness and learn about different modalities that are going to keep them well. Because wellness is not something that just happens overnight. Wellness is something that happens, health and wellness is something that happens continually every day from the moment you're born. It's not something that you just suddenly one day go, oh, well, you know, I'm going to get well now, and it doesn't happen that way. So it's all the little things you do in the day. It's what you think. It's what you take in. It's the air you breathe, the water, the way you move your body, exercise, your emotional environment. It's all of those things help to achieve wellness. And so when I was working in clinical work, I was already teaching because I had begun my teaching of other people when I was still in naturopathic college. And so reaching a global audience was my biggest dream. And of course, at those days, there was no internet. So it was quite difficult. It was all done by mail. And, you know, to now realize we have a large number of guests online. We have all of you guys in the classroom. It's so wonderful you're here. And we can actually live stream with the help of our amazing guru, Andy, here. It's a wonderful, you know, it's really fantastic. So if you need any more information, if you would like any of the full research papers that I've talked about today, just contact our librarian. Her name's Ashley. She's extremely helpful. You can also contact me because I have the majority of them as full papers, not just abstracts. If you want to talk to an admissions advisor, well, you saw all this because Scott went over it. But the one thing I want to talk about a little more is being a B Corp. Have you heard about B Corps? Okay, great. Okay.
Today was the first time it was mentioned.
Ah, okay. Okay, great. Well, we became a B Corp a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago. And basically a B Corp is focused on people, planet, and profit. So it's not just profit. And when you become a B Corp, you really have to show with a very large and extensive application, you know, all of the things you do that help people and the planet, and, you know, that you actually put a percentage of your funds to achieving that. And there's more B Corps now than ever. It's a global organization. It's really wonderful to be part of the B Corp movement. It really is, and they're doing a lot of good work. And, you know, you really, you know, so we only do business with vendors who support the planet, which is another reason why we focus on certified organic, not just pesticide free, because of course healthy soil is really having a huge impact on global warming. Soil and the health of soil really can help reduce the carbon dioxide that is causing such a huge problem, and that's something worth looking at, which is why biodynamic and organic farming practices are so desirable, let alone not taking in all the pesticides that we know have an enormous impact on our health. Pesticides have been shown to mimic estrogen in the body, so it's a very large problem for a lot of people, not just women, for men too. Men are also getting breast cancers, and we just see so many diseases now that were just not even around 40 years ago. It's really quite horrific, and the contamination of the globe by pesticides is very, very frightening. They've done a core sample of ice in the Antarctic, 25 feet down, and they tested what was down there, and it was totally full of pesticides, DDT. DDT stays in the environment for a long, long time, and I was very concerned. I had a personal conversation with the head of IFRA, that is a regulatory body for flavour and fragrance and essential oils in Europe. She said there's actually a black market for DDT. Yeah. So a lot of pesticides that are banned in Europe and banned here are sold under a different name in Asia. So it's a very, disconcerting issue. So B Corp is environmental, it's people, it's fair trade. I have been to too many essential oil distilleries and gone to too many essential oil plantations where the people harvesting, usually women, are very, very sick, and I might add very poorly paid. Why is that? Well, if the field is contaminated with or sprayed with pesticides as they harvest the roses, for example, they are also ingesting that. It can enter through your skin. And a lot of the women at one of the places I visited in Turkey that is not a certified organic facility had a variety of different cancers. And the field was littered with empty pesticide containers. And the other issue with essential oils, and it's a huge problem, many essential oil manufacturers, i.e. the distillers, are very small, very low funded. I mean, there's some very sophisticated distillers out there, but there's still a lot of production by small farmers with just simple stills, and they may even use recycled drums to put the oil in. So that's something else that whenever I go and check our sources of our essential oils, I'm always looking at, what do they put the bulk raw material in. And I have seen pesticide drums used, recycled pesticide drums. So one of my recommendations to the buyer from this particular distillery was, why don't you supply them clean drums and they deliver them to you. You then give them more drums, but you're always continually putting the same oil in the same drums. You can empty that drum and give it back to them the next time, right? I mean, you can get all the oil out of a drum and you can clean it if they really have to recycle drums. But there's a huge market in Asia for recycled drums. So, I mean, it's a huge problem. And, being aware of all these things is part of our commitment. I mean, it was part of our commitment long before we were a B Corp. It's something I've been involved with all my life. I mean, I grew up with Rachel Carson. Anyone read Rachel Carson? Hey, Sarah. So I couldn't encourage you enough to read Rachel Carson, A Silent Spring. It's an amazing book that really was the beginning of the environmental movement. There were plenty of people gardening organically and farming organically prior to that, but she was really the first person to come out and people listened. And she was an American woman. The book published in 1962, I believe.
What was it called again?
A Silent Spring. Yeah, you can get it on Spring, A Silent Spring, Rachel Carson, very good book. And interestingly enough, she died a couple of years after publishing that book. She received a lot of criticism, and I imagine it was extremely difficult to be, you know, in that environment. I mean, chemistry was everything, right? Synthetics were everything in those days, and even now it's very difficult to stand against companies like Monsanto, for example. It's finally happening.
The evil world.
It's finally happening.
They were bought out by Bayer, I heard.
They were bought out by
And
Bayer.
everybody's got that, oh, Bayer aspirin, it must be safe. So it's going to be interesting to see how that mentality
Well,
goes.
yes, because, you know, the very word Monsanto puts the fear of you know, whatever in most people. I mean, they're frightening. It's a frightening company. I mean, the concept of GMO seed. Oh,
I have a daughter who's a farmer.
oh, it's horrific.
Yeah.
But what is even more horrific to me is that Monsanto will reinvent itself in countries like India under a different name. Because of course they recognize the name. I mean, you know, people all worldwide are most people are anti-GMO. I mean, the people you talk to, the farmers. I spent a month teaching women farmers in Nepal last year or the year before as a voluntary project. And, you know, part of our commitment as a B Corp is volunteer work and working with, you know, underadvantaged people, and particularly with global change, climate change. It's very difficult for farmers, particularly farmers who, you know, they're relying on oxen to plow their fields, and they've got minimal equipment, minimal seed, they can't get seed. And now the water that used to be in the river where they got their water is all dried up. So they now have to
taken it out of
well, not even that, Julie. Actually, it just stopped raining. You know, I mean, the rain. I mean, there is a problem definitely with if the water source is a different country, then that country may take more water than they should be, and therefore the country down below is, you know, going to have less water. I mean, water rights when rivers run through countries, it's very complicated and complex. But in this particular case, they felt it was global warming, it was climate change, because not only that, they've been able to grow rice at higher altitudes. They can grow, you know, it's much warmer at higher altitudes up in the Himalayas. I was actually right down on the Indian Nepalese border. I was in 2 different locations, and one location was on the far west, where they're endeavouring to retain the forest there that runs between India. It crosses over India and Nepal, and it's a World Heritage Forest because the last of the 67 Asian tigers live in that forest.
Oh, yeah.
The last in the world. And guess what? They think tiger heart is a wonderful, you know, like Viagra.
Like rhino.
Yeah. There's rhinoceroses there too.
Nothing but heritage.
So there's a lot of trade, illegal trade in animal organs. There's just a lot of issues going on, but it's a two-way street. The big elephants come out of the forest and they want to go into the gardens of all the local people, and they eat all their food, and they're very poor. They rely on their gardens, and frequently they kill. While I was there, 2 or 3 people were actually killed by elephants trying to defend their gardens. And so the elephants and other animals come out to get food because their area is getting smaller and smaller, and the people who rely on fuel for cooking and warmth, they go into the forest and get wood, and so there's a two-way interaction that is negative in pretty much every way. And so what they've done there is this really great concept. They've created a buffer zone, and it's over a large area, and it runs the whole length of the border. and in Nepal, and between the forest and the farms. And this very wide buffer zone, they're planting aromatic plants because the animals don't like to eat the aromatic plants and they just don't come through it. And the people use the aromatic plants for their, economic health. So they're distilling, they're doing all sorts of things with these plants. So we were there. I went there with my husband, Robert Seidel, to help improve the yield and improve the crops and look at other crops they could possibly grow. So they do German chamomile. They were doing a type of peppermint, or a type of mint. They were doing a lot of different kind of plants there. So that was a very interesting place. But the other place I was at was like a truck stop town, again on the border, surrounded by rural land that primarily women farmed, and they leased the land between the rows of trees in the national forest. So it was really a great program because they were able to actually farm. The trees were wide enough, planted, like pretty much the space of this classroom, the width of this classroom was the width between the rows of trees. And the trees were like eucalypts or different types of hardwoods. And so the land in between, they were growing lemongrass, citronella, palmarosa, holy basil, and, distilling. Now, the women weren't distilling. They were taking all of their plants to a distillery that was run by men. It wasn't, it just was an interesting, it was interesting culturally, and it was interesting on the level of division of sexist, work as well. And the women knew nothing about distillation. They really didn't know anything about farming. They didn't know anything about, the quality of the oil and how to really improve that. So that's what we were there for. One of the things I like to do whenever I'm in, a different culture is always ask people what they want. What is it that you need from me? Because I might have a completely different idea about what they need. And really what these women needed most of all was water. Their water supply had dried up. So they were now carrying water in big vessels, which I tried to lift up. I could not put this thing on my head, I tell you. I could not believe what they were carrying. It was bad enough they carry huge bundles of wood, because again, there's no fuel. They've got no electricity. They've got no way to cook. So we have since then installed a well in Nepal as part of our mission and our commitment, and it just happened this year. And so they've reached water. They reached water actually, I think, at 95 feet. We were really worried there wasn't going to be any water. They hand dug this well. It was a huge effort. And we have a press release on the website, so you can go and read that. And I believe we've got some of the video there as well. But if not, talk to me and I can.
So is it a community well that everybody in the community comes to and gets water for themselves?
I hope so. I hope they don't think they own it.
Well, no,
it's my well. I'm making it a community well.
It's not like piped anywhere.
No.
It's
get the water out of the well. Yeah, with a bucket.
Gather and.
Yeah, exactly. And it's close to their farm, so anyway, I digress. Any questions about what the class was really about? No? All right. Any questions? No? Okay, so we all know about blending and synergy, and I think Amanda's going to be next with blending as well. So you'll enjoy Professor Ladden. So thank you very much, everybody. And thank you, everybody that was online. Thanks, Andy.